Hi there. My name is Arsen Grigoryan and I am going to be your professor in this statistics class. Let me briefly introduce myself. I graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago with PhD in industrial engineering and operations research. Currently, I work for Medtronic, a leading manufacturer of medical devices, as principal quality assurance engineer. At the same time, I teach several statistical courses at Medtronic, namely statistical process control, statistical methods for engineers, as well as design of experiments. The topic I have picked up for the presentation is going to emphasize the importance of the statistics in nations' safety and efficacy. As I mentioned earlier, I work for the medical device manufacturer. One could only imagine how important that the product we develop, manufacture, and supply to our customers meet customers' expectations. How we demonstrate then that our product meets customer expectation? Well, the concept is called process capability. What is the process capability? It is simply a ratio of the voice of customer over voice of the process. Now, let's uh, work out an example. As I mentioned, process capability, let's define it as CP, which will stand for potential process capability, and we will differentiate from CP from CPK later on. It's voice of the customer over voice of the process. As I mentioned earlier, voice of the customer is simply the specification requirements for the product. For example, we manufacture several type of catheters, and the dimensional characteristics of the catheters are very important because they are going to be utilized in conjunction with other medical devices. So certainly we want to be sure that the catheters fit to the introducers or other mating devices. Therefore, the outer diameter of the catheter is of high importance for the customer. Let us imagine the customer wants our catheter to be within upper specification limit 70 thousandths of inch and low specification limit of it 67 thousandths of inch. So in this situation, voice of customer implies that the outer diameter of the catheter shall not be more than 70 thousandths of inch and shall not be less than 67 thousandths of inch. Okay, now let's go back to the formula and understand what is voice of the process. Voice of the process is simply the variation of your process. How we determine the variation of the process? We collect samples from the process and calculate the standard deviation based on the samples and multiply by 6, and that defines what is the variability of your process. Well, let us imagine that we collected sample size of 30 catheters. We measured ODs, outer diameters, and we came up with standard deviation equal 3/10 of thousandths of inch. We also calculated average of the data, and it came out to be 68 thousandths of inch. Now how we calculate the potential capability of the process? Well, we have everything what we need. CP is equal upper specification limit minus low specification limit divided by 6 standard deviation, which will imply that we substitute the numbers and 6 times over 3/10,000 of inch is going to be 18/10,000 of inch. Then CP is going to be 1.67. Well, how good is that number? And what it does tell us? The industry accepts that a potential capability of 1.33 is a good demonstration that process is acceptable. So in this case, we have 1.67, and which tells us that our process is good and meets customer requirements. However, the potential capability on its own is not sufficient to satisfy customer requirements. And why is that? Well, let me explain on the graph. Say, that's the low specification limit. That's the upper specification limit. It's 0.067, 0.070. And this is our x-axis. As I mentioned, the process average is 68 thousandths of inch, and which means that process is off target. Correct? And process capability potential doesn't take into account how well your process is centered. And you could have potentially capable process but be technically outside of your specification limit, because the formula for process capability, it takes the difference between upper specification limit and low specification limit and divides by 6 process standard deviations. It doesn't take into account how well your process center is. That's where the concept or CPK is coming forward. CPK index will assure that regardless how your process is off-centered, the process capability remains acceptable for the customer. But because of the time limitations, we are going to cover CPK indexes in the next session. Okay, I hope you enjoy my lecture. See you next time. Bye.